Hey folks, I hope you're doing pretty good today. I know I should say I hope you're doing great, but you know what? Great is just pushing it a little bit sometimes. Um, my guest today is Timothy J. Jones. TJ, he goes by. And this is something that I've been kind of thinking about on my own myself is this inner self, this discovery. What is it that I want to do? Am I burnt out with anything? How can I further myself? How can I make myself feel better? So, TJ and I are going to talk about this. He's got a book out that's called The Caring Warrior, but he's going to go through talking to us about, how he kind of had this success, how everybody looked at him as this successful person that had it all, that well, he did have it all. He had a great life, a varied life, and in fact, he's going to talk about thing with Kobe Bryant. So if you're a basketball fan, stick around for that. It's very short, but it's near the beginning. But anyhow, so he's gonna kind of give this back end story of how he came to this point of writing the book and this self discovery. So please sit back, listen to the podcast. Thank you again for always being here and supporting the channel. And please, if you haven't done so, please share the podcast and comment. So let's get right into it after I remind you, if you're a pet owner, please be responsible and have that pet of yours spayed or neutered. Thanks. I'm looking at you as that transformational expert, the guy who's been there, pulled himself out.
Yeah.
Do you want me to call you TJ, Timothy, Tim, Mr. Jones? I wanted to say that, Mr. Jones. Me.
Exactly. I was a school teacher
You were.
when I came out of school, out of graduate school, and it was weird to be called Mr. Jones, but it was also, it led into multiple different songs. I'm trying to think, was it Green Day that had a song? There's also Sinatra, of course.
I want to make sure that we talk about The Caring Warrior, your book, and we really want to talk about that inner struggles that people have and
Yes.
that you've gone through. And, hopefully you've got some pointers for the listeners or the viewers to help themselves. And I say help themselves because I think it takes ourselves to get ourselves out of that position. Nobody else can do it. They can show us the way, and I'm just hoping that you're able to help show the way.
Yeah, definitely some hard-won lessons, and it's a daily struggle, but it does come right down to the internal part, right? We wake up every day in our own brain, our own heart, and it takes us. And I think so many people are externally focused that it really helps to be good to yourself and working on that continuously,
100% agree. Do you want to start off by giving a little bit of the background to yourself and, maybe some of the struggles and how you got to this point, why you wrote a book,
Absolutely.
just so people can relate to you?
Cool. Yeah, very, very interesting background, I guess you could say, in terms of my career life. I've mentioned to you I was a teacher. I did a little acting while I was in that starving artist phase of my life. It's kind of cool sidebar. Kobe Bryant was one of my students when I was teaching in the Philadelphia area early on. Yeah, what a great guy. Very smart. He was a sophomore at the time. Who knew he would become what he became? But I got into the corporate world, I suppose, mainly because I saw a future of having a family and a mortgage and car payments and all that stuff. So it made sense to pursue sales, and I went into the pharmaceutical industry and really had a great start to my career, and got into leadership positions early, and that was not what I expected. I thought, climbing the ladder was going to be the way to go. And of course I did, but it was very difficult to be working with and through other people versus just kind of relying on yourself. And so I really loved that learning curve and got so much from it that I ultimately was asked to become the head of training department and leadership development. So I got involved in mentoring the rising leaders and middle managers, junior executives, and helped out with getting people ready to become leaders. So often organizations will just take a high performer, put them in a role, and they've never had to lead other people before. And
Yeah.
it's not always the greatest fit. It's sometimes can be not what they're expecting, and they're not always the most successful people at it because all of a sudden you're dealing with others and their challenges and their worries and their successes or failures. So it's difficult. But I was very passionate about that. And that meant a lot of traveling and a very busy life and kind of answering to a number of people, in addition to starting a family and following that pathway to the perfect life, the fairy tale. And at one point, going through a company reorganization and lots of pressure, knowing that changes were coming for people, I was just burning out and wasn't aware of it. I looked successful on the outside, you know,
Mm.
and there's a lot of pressure in our society to do that. Well, I came home from a trip late night on I guess it was like a Thursday or early Friday morning, and made my way through the Friday, but Saturday morning, got outside to do some yard work, and something was off with me, but I didn't quite know what. And all of a sudden, I collapsed in the flower bed and I started sobbing. And it was sort of like that fast but slow motion at the same time. And the way I describe it is a panic attack mixed with depression. It was all kind of crashing down at once. And I knew that it was something that was coming up from inside. And I went into a mode where I knew something had to change, and that sort of set things in motion, and realized that I was indeed going through depression. I had anxiety as well, and even deeper, I was had been repressing so many things from my childhood, traumatic events, in an abusive situation, somebody outside the family that should have been a really good role model and wasn't. And these memories started to come up. And, here I was in this life living all these things, pressure and like I said, that air of success. But inside I was broken,
Yeah.
empty.
You know, that's, I think one of the things that you're saying is that you knew that it was internal, something's coming up, and then you realize, recognize it was you're depressed. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people are afraid to admit or afraid to face and look at is depression because of some stigma of, well, you're weak, you're not good, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
If you're depressed, that type of thing. And so we say, I'm not depressed. And it just, we internalize it. Like I said, you got to that boiling point where it physically hit you and you just,
Yeah.
boom, collapsed.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't, aside from, scraping my knee on the way down, um, I wasn't, I wasn't physically in any crisis,
Mm-hmm.
but the mixture of the emotions and, the chemicals inside and my soul was crying
Yeah.
out for, to be heard. And so you're right, it did. It came right from the inside, and I couldn't run from whatever it was. anymore. And now I'm
Yeah.
I'm grateful that that happened. It was the beginning of an awakening.
Yeah. It's. I'll say that you're. Well, first I'll say I'm not a counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, or anything like that. But I'll say you probably are a handful of the people who have that awakening because of that depression and find their way through it.
Mm,
And like you're saying too, at the very beginning, it can be a daily struggle. And it very well may be that you fight through it every day type of situation. I
yep.
guess I'll equate it to maybe being an alcoholic and then you've been sober for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. But it's a daily thing that you go through.
Yeah. We all have, you know, those shadows,
Hmm.
those demons. And the irony, Chuck, is that I was in an industry where not only did I have to learn the science and the biochemistry of a lot of these things, but I was with an organization and working with a team, the brain and pain team. So I knew a lot about serotonin and the neuroreceptors. And I never thought I would be depressed. You know, there's almost like
Yeah.
this, it's like a separate, it's like a separate thing. And now I realize that what we think of as depression can certainly be scientific, it can be physiological, but there are also life circumstances that could be happening in the moment or life circumstances from the past. It can be other exterior things that are pressing down. A majority of people were feeling depressed and anxious during COVID, for example.
Hmm.
So it's multifactorial. It's not just I'm one of the weaker people in air quotes that got depressed. And you're right, that stigma is such a shame because there's a fear of the feeling, but there's also the fear of the perception of saying I'm depressed and having it be
Right.
actually true.
Yeah. And like you're saying, you're this guy that's in this industry and you could diagnose and you were self-diagnosing and you knew all the signs, but hey, that's not me. I'm not depressed. Um
Yeah.
it's what what can I mean other than that feeling that just welled up inside and dropped at your knees and started you crying, are there signs that people can actually look into themselves and question it, or is that one of the signs is if you're questioning yourself about depression?
Yeah, it's a interesting to tell you that prior that week, a few days prior to that collapse, I was waking up in some hotel in some city yet again, and I just had that feeling of not wanting to go to bed.
Mm.
I wasn't looking forward to the day. I wasn't looking forward to whatever meeting I was going to be taking part in. And, that's a good sign, right? That sort of lack of enthusiasm, lack of energy, you know, things that don't typically would have been things you were looking forward to and excited about, you don't feel them anymore, or
Mm.
you feel them at a much, much lower level. So I'm feeling this way in a hotel room. And as I reach to my bag to like get some stuff out for the day, I see a note that my daughter had left me. And it was this adorable picture of a dad and a daughter in crayon. And it said, Daddy, I hate when you go on trips, or I don't like it when you go away on trips. Thank you for taking such good care of us. Such a good boy. So, that little thing kind of, not kind of, it was so sweet, but it perked me up for the day. But to your question, it's that it's that feeling if you're aware of it and you can pull yourself back and say, I am not myself. I'm not. smiling as much. I'm not laughing as much. I'm not seeing the bright side of things. And there are technically there are resources that people could reach out. There is something called the DSM-5. It may be 6 at this point, but they really are criteria for what it means to either be depressed, or there are other rating scales for anxiety, for other mental mental challenges at a time, and in varying degrees. So yeah, I was aware of those feelings, but again, not really wanting to face it until I absolutely had to. And
Yeah.
it was the dark night of my soul. I think that's part of life. Unfortunately, people don't think that there's sort of this, I'm supposed to be happy all the time, or I'm in active pursuit of joy and happiness every day, all the time. And I was probably really guilty of that. And that's an accelerator on a car that just can't stay in that position. There
Yeah.
have to be those other times.
I want to add that this depression that we're talking about and these feelings can hit anyone at any time. Especially right now, you hear a lot of the younger people, kids in
Yes,
school, who are depressed. And while we're growing up, we knew the word depression, but we were kids. We weren't depressed. We were playing outside doing stuff. There's no such thing as depression. Mom and dad were depressed, but not us.
right.
But now it can hit anyone at any point in time. The other thing, too, is demographics. It doesn't matter
No.
where you are, who you are. Here, like you said, you had this upward mobile movement. You were this guy on the outside that was successful, had it all,
Yes.
but there was that inner demon struggle of I'm not happy or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And to me, a lot of it has to do with, people say you have to love yourself, self
Mm-hmm.
love. It's a great expression. But to me, it's more about self acceptance. And I think that was what was missing for me, was anything that maybe I didn't like about myself, or the fears or insecurities that I carried. I wasn't okay with that, so I just pushed them aside and
Yeah.
tried to carry myself in pursuit of, you know, external approval, you know?
Yeah, and that's the thing is we are looking for somebody else to give us that approval, affirmation, if you want to call it. I know a lot of people talk about the affirmation and things, but we ourselves look for somebody else to say that we're okay. Hey, TJ, you're okay.
That's
All
right.
right, but is that real? No, because like you said, you haven't accepted maybe whatever it is that that you're going through.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, um, I don't think we can ever look inside and say, um, you know, I'm great in every way. I'm okay. I don't think any of
Yeah,
us are completely okay. We're here living this life experience, and there are always going to be new challenges and new fears and new insecurities. I think the self acceptance part is to say to oneself, I'm okay with not being okay. I'm okay with not having all the answers. And I also now realize that everybody struggles. And I forget the famous person in history or something. It may have even been Abe Lincoln or something, but said something like, don't worry so much about what other people think, because they're not thinking about you. They're worried about themselves.
yes,
Which isn't necessarily to say everybody's incredibly selfish, but there's relief in that, in the sense that we're all fighting our own uphill battles, and
yeah,
we all have doubts about ourselves. But to think you can't have them, you can't have those fears and insecurities, is definitely a road down into, you know, some trouble is gonna
Yeah.
happen. So
I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you, is it okay to not be okay all the time? And like I said, it's okay not to be okay all the time,
for sure.
but I think as long as we recognize and accept,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And accept the that the yardstick that either has been put there for us or that we have created for ourselves, it's a it's a very ambiguous, nebulous measurement, and resetting that to showing up each day with a little bit more of and I'm okay with me, and I'm grateful for being here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to think about the things that I get to think about. You know, there's often made these references of fight or flight and how back in the day it was really about waking up and getting the food and making sure that you were physically safe. You know, in the hierarchy of needs, it was all about safety, food, just survival, and
Yeah.
extending the tribe along. Nowadays, we have the option of thinking about: Am I happy? Am I in the right job? Do I want to put flowers over there, or should I plant some, herbs? Or, we have a lot of choices and a lot of options, and to kind of wake up in a more simple way and just be grateful for some of those things and those opportunities is kind of a nice thing. I know that sounds pretty deep, but we have the ability to ask those questions because we're not literally in danger necessarily every moment of the day. At least,
Yeah.
fortunately, in our society here in the U.S., we're not worrying at the moment about some of the things that other people have to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see it here on the news on a daily basis here. Um, you, but you're right. We have to have gratitude, and I think that's the thing that a lot of us uh, don't have. And not to make people feel down or doubt themselves or anything like that, but we are important, but we're not as important as we think. And I want to clarify that
Yeah.
because kind of like what you're saying is, um, what am I? Oh, I like me. First thing, I point out the negative about me. Oh, TJ, yeah, I didn't shave this morning. Oh, TJ, yeah, I've got the red on instead of. I'm making up pointing out these things that I think somebody else is going to comment or think about.
Yeah.
You know, why is Chuck got red underneath that black shirt? Why didn't he shave? TJ didn't care. He wasn't looking at that. But me, I manifested that in my head and I brought it up as a negative thing right off the bat.
Well, I was actually thinking that you can rock the beard. I grow the weakest beard you've ever seen. So I shave it because I know it doesn't have any potential. But you're right, we do. We think those things, and it's human nature. You
Yes.
know, it gives me an opportunity to say something that I hope your audience will digest or try to digest. You know, something I've learned through my this journey that I've been on of really looking at myself, life differently, is to realize that the many thoughts that we have running through our mind, is the lighting good? Do I have the right outfit on? All the thoughts, or I shouldn't have done this, and I don't know if this person likes me, or the negative self-talk, the negative
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, the fears, the jealousies, the envy, the regrets, anxieties about the future. All of those thoughts are thoughts. they're not who we are. They're
Yeah.
just thoughts. And I do teach meditation, and one of the greatest little tips I've ever heard is to step back and recognize the thoughts, recognize the emotions that are associated with them, but to think of them as maybe clouds that are just passing, and floating by. They're temporary, and
Yeah.
it's not real in the sense that we often will grab onto a thought that leads to an emotion and we react to that. And I think it's called the ladder of inference. We start to spiral into a story. So, one quick negative thought that's a temporary passing cloud, we grab onto it, we attach ourselves to that thought. It's, we'll say it's negative. That negative thought turns into another negative thought and more negative emotion. And before you know it, you're angry about something that's not even really happening in the moment. And
Yeah.
I say we time travel. So those are things to be conscious of. And one of the ways that I've learned to manage that is with that little metaphor, but also to just kind of step back and think, I'm observing, I'm observing what's going on. Like I'm watching a movie. And with a little bit of detachment like that, it's surprisingly freeing. And if you can see yourself starting to spiral out into unnecessary worry or getting angry about something that hasn't even happened yet, you can sort of detach from that a little bit. Easier said than done. I'm no guru, but
Yeah.
it does help.
You know, your detachment, your attachment things. I know this might be just a little bit off, but the first thing I was thinking about is we can attach ourselves to those negative thoughts, negative emotions so much easier than the positive to attach ourselves. We detach from that. And as an example, is somebody says, Chuck, man, you did great. You look great. No, I wasn't. I didn't do good. No, really, no. Rather than saying, "Oh, thank you," we said, "No, no, 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 no." We kind of push that away. But if somebody says, "What happened to you yesterday?" All of a sudden, you're thinking about all these negative things. Maybe you're making them up. I know that's a little bit off
Oh,
from what you were talking about, maybe, but we attach ourselves to those negative thoughts and
yeah,
manifest and create those negative thoughts so much easier than anything positive and accepting.
yeah. I think you're right. It's fair to say that we spend the majority of our time, majority of our awakened life. I can't speak to the sleeping theories, but we spend a lot of our waking lives in negative thinking. There are, you know, there's research out there that it's somewhere around 70% or something of the thoughts that we
Ooh,
have.
wow.
And you're right. It's definitely easier to go there. And when you said, the thoughts about what other people say, even if they're actually saying, "Hey, you look good. I like your beard. Red looks great with black." Um, if we're in that headspace, we're not picking it up. So the
Yeah.
irony is that we're concerned about the outside input and approval, and yet we're getting it, and it's not even sticking because we're so focused. One of the things that I teach, I call it emotional math. So I say T plus B equals O, and T stands for our thoughts. B is our behavior, which shows in our actions and our words, equals O, outcomes. So if our thinking is negative and it leads to more negative thinking, and that story that gives us negative emotions, and that influences our behavior. That influences the things that we say and the things that we do. And ultimately, that has everything to do with the outcomes. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a friend on a project and had to meet some of her colleagues, and I misinterpreted what the meeting was going to be about and how the meeting was going to go. And I felt like the meeting went poor. I felt like I didn't represent myself very well in this meeting. And I was, disappointed when it ended. And by the end of the day, by the time we had a chance to chat with each other, I had a whole story about how horrible it was and how horrible I was in the meeting. And I was wrong. I was inaccurate about that. And I was a grump the whole day about it. So my behaviors reflected the thoughts that I had, and I wasn't even accurate about it. So I know
I,
we all do
I
that.
like your T plus B equals O because
Yeah.
you're right. Your thoughts plus that behavior equals that outcome, and it's just yeah.
And it's just a
Man.
thing where we, if we're just a little more aware of it, we can maybe push the brakes sometimes, or we can reflect on some of those things and actually dissect it a little bit versus just rolling forward and just that's who I am, and that's how it is and that's how it goes, versus seeing it with a little bit clearer eyes.
Yeah. Well, before I make a comment, I want to make sure that everybody knows that you do have a really good website. So it's at timothyjjones.com, right? And there's a lot of information there about what we're talking about. And everything I think that we're talking about could work in your professional life or your personal life.
For
So
sure.
don't don't take it one way or the other. Take it all ways and both ways. And yes, that pun is intended. Take it always because this stuff helps. Whether or not we think we need it, I think hearing about it, we can all relate to something that you're talking about, TJ, and
Yeah.
it's helpful. And the one thing I wanted to throw out right now, because we are in that internet age of where things are transmitted so fast, and we see so many people, whether we'll call it influencers,
Yeah.
but whether it's personal or personal, we look at these people and say, wow, what a life they have. I wish I was like that, without knowing what their backstory is. They could have that struggle, but like you were saying,
Yeah.
you have this outward appearance of very successful, but internally you are not happy with yourself, or whatever it may have been. So we all go through this.
Amen. We do. And we do make the mistake of seeing something, seeing someone. Celebrities are a great example, and we think they've got it all, right? That
Mm-hmm.
I and I wish I had that money or looked like that or could live that lifestyle. And it's certainly, it's kind of cliche to say it, but all that glitters isn't gold. It just and often there's a lot of fragility behind that. So that goes back to that whole self-acceptance thing. And the stories that I was telling myself, despite, I guess, you know, living a pretty successful life, if you will, is that inside I was thinking all these different things that I'm trying, and all these different pursuits, I'm failing at all of them. That was what was going on in my mind. I'm not living up to whatever that yardstick is. I'm
Yeah.
failing. I'm not enough. And I think what happens to people, whether it's professional or personal, is that will become the inner story. I'm not good enough. I'm not what I should be or what people want me to be. And I'm not lovable then, too. If that's true, then I'm not worthy of love and friendship and respect. So those were some of the things that I was telling myself at that time.
Wow. Is a lot of what we're talking about in your book, The Caring Warrior?
Yeah, and I know I haven't really talked about where that even came from. What's the concept of a
Yeah.
caring warrior? The paradox of the two words is to say that we think of warrior as fighting, of conflict, of death, of taking someone's life, or but what I'd like to pose is that the caring part of it comes in where the caring warrior is someone who stands up for a different kind of strength, love, and raising other people up, and showing up in a way where you serve the greater good, as opposed to just take what you can from whatever situation you're in. And the reason that I came up with that title was I was doing a leadership seminar, and I invited this modern day samurai, if you will, and an expert on Japanese history. And he helped me teach this class. We used some of the Bushido samurai concepts to teach some leadership virtues. And at the end of this, he presented me with a plaque, and the class presented me with a sword, which was beautiful. But he presented me with this plaque that had Japanese symbols on it, and they stood for Katsujin Ken, which in Japanese translates to life-giving sword. And he said, as he presented it to me, TJ, you are a life-giving sword. You do good, you care for others, you show up with love in your heart, goodwill, and yet you're still strong in the way that you do that. Well, in this depressed state and questioning everything, I grabbed a hold of that memory, and it was one of the things that helped me to move forward. That kind of gave me an identity and a sense
Mm.
of purpose. I can be that person. And as I became more fulfilled and I was coming out of that depressed and anxious state, I thought I have to share this with other people, because I know there are so many people that struggle with this, of every age group and, any circumstance. Every human being has these types of struggles. And so I thought I'll use the metaphor of this caring warrior and maybe people can relate to it. So that's where it came from.
Okay. Well, and I'm going to say, yes, your book and what we're talking about right now, I think will once again resonate and help many people.
I
So,
hope so.
so where can people go to get the book? I know we mentioned your website. Can they get it from there? Can they get it from other outlets?
Yeah, it's on Amazon mostly. That's where most people are shopping, but barnesandnoble.com, Books a Million, I think, has it. Um,
Mm,
yeah, it isn't really in a lot of stores. That's just because I haven't been doing a lot of publicity until recently. But yeah, it's available, and people seem to like it. And I think what they like the most is just the vulnerability that I've put in there.
well, folks, you can be strong and you can be vulnerable at the same time.
Amen.
Yeah. So, man, is there anything else that you could fill us in on before we close out and go and enjoy our day and do good for ourselves and others?
Yeah, I'll just give everybody a simple acronym model that is obviously born out of this concept, and it's the I care model. I stands for intention. C stands for connection, A for awareness, R for resilience, and E for engagement. And each of those is a pillar, I would say, of living a more fulfilled, more self satisfied type of life. Intention, have a sense for what it is that really matters to you and how you want to show up. Connection is
Okay.
not just to connect with others, although that's part of it, but to be connected to yourself and whatever your higher power is. Awareness is like we spoke of, listening to your thoughts and asking yourself, is this legitimate or not? Being aware of what's going on, but not so involved in it that you can get lost in it. So be aware. Resilience is knowing that you want to be able to sustain the life that you have, sustain the things that you do, and not run yourself into the ground, not burn out. And then E is engagement. You know, take action, take steps, move forward, and through activity and through living, as you said earlier to me before we went live, engage in life, engage in the beauty and the things that we have to embrace and enjoy.
I like it, the I care. And I'm glad you went through the acronyms because I wanted to ask a little bit more about resilience and engagement. Um, we may all get through the I car, but that E,
Yeah,
a lot of us don't engage and take that final step to engage. So
it's a
there
process. It's
it
always a
is.
process, but it's worth it. It's worth the effort.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Timothy Jones, Mr. Jones, TJ,
All my
this has
personalities.
been
Yeah.
great. Yeah, all three of you. This has been fantastic. And, again, it's whether you know it or not, it's always good to be refreshed and reminded of these things.
Yeah.
And it's okay to, we won't say it's okay to be depressed, but it's okay to not be happy every second of the
Hmm.
day. You might strive for it, but I think it makes life that much more exciting. But always, always have that happiness, that happy right there next to you. Just
Yeah.
uh,
There's a
find,
lot to enjoy. There's a lot to be happy about.
yeah, finding that purpose. Everybody has a purpose, whatever it is, and whatever makes you happy. What do they say? Whatever floats your boat.
Yeah. And I think the fulfillment, happiness comes from the byproduct of growing, progressing, moving through life in that way, and continuing continuing on, and not letting those doubts and those fears hold us back. Just keep going and realize that around you, everybody else is having their fears and doubts and struggles too. So you're not alone. That's really, I think, the message of my book, whether you're in leadership positions, you know, professional life, corporate, business, entrepreneurial, or just in your personal life with the loved ones. You're not alone. Everybody
Yeah.
has their challenges.
Well, it kind of goes back to that acronym of yours, the TBO. This time we can say PTBO, positive thoughts and behavior equals that outcome.
Nice. I see a book in you, man.
I better start really simple if I can do that. See spot run.
I think I found my guru.
Well, TJ, I appreciate this. This is great. You're awesome.
Oh, right back at you. And you look great in red, and you've got an awesome beard, man.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right.